Mike stood frozen, jaw slack, staring across his lawn in pure disbelief. A woman in high heels, screaming like a banshee, was locked in a chaotic tug-of-war with his prized pig, Sir Porrington. The pig, undeterred by the chaos, had enthusiastically buried his snout into a towering, glitter-covered birthday cake proudly labeled Happy Sweet 16 Amber. Each shriek from the woman only seemed to excite Sir Porrington further, as he happily munched mouthfuls of sugary frosting. Guests either scattered in horror or burst into laughter, snapping photos of the scene like it was a reality TV finale. Only an hour earlier, Mike had been enjoying a peaceful Saturday morning, coffee in hand, gazing over his shimmering pond from the comfort of his porch swing. Serenity Pond had always been his little slice of heaven, a family heirloom passed down through generations, where frogs croaked lullabies and ducks floated lazily across the water. The morning calm had been shattered when a shiny black SUV tore up his gravel driveway. Dust billowed behind it as a woman emerged with all the pomp of royalty attending a red carpet event. Dressed in a blinding pink pantsuit and armed with a clipboard like it was a sword, she marched straight up to his porch, heels striking the wood with militant precision. "I'm looking for whoever is responsible for this disaster," she announced, eyeing his mud-covered pigs like they were biohazards. Mike, bemused, rose slowly and extended a calloused hand. "That'd be me. Name's Mike. What can I do for you?" She recoiled, sniffing disdainfully. "Karen Jenkins, head of the Homeowners Association," she said, like she was revealing a royal title. "We have standards around here. Your livestock," she gestured dramatically, "are an eyesore." Mike lifted an eyebrow. "Well, Miss Jenkins, I'm sorry my pigs offend your sensibilities, but this land's not part of your HOA. Karen's eyes narrowed. "Your pond borders our community. That makes it our jurisdiction." Mike gave a dry chuckle. "That pond's been in my family longer than your HOA's been breathing. Try again." Karen hissed through gritted teeth, scribbled something furiously on her clipboard, and stormed off in a cloud of gravel dust. Mike figured that was the end of it, until a few days later, when he discovered an envelope pinned to his mailbox with pastel floral patterns and an aggressively cheerful font. Inside was a note that read, "Dear neighbor, due to unforeseen pool maintenance, we shall be hosting my daughter's Sweet 16 at your charming pond. You are permitted to attend if appropriately dressed. Please ensure your animals and mud are thoroughly removed for the enjoyment of our esteemed guests." Mike read it twice, laughter bubbling from his chest. The audacity. She hadn't even asked, just declared her plans like she was queen of the county. But if Karen wanted to host a pond party, Mike would be a gracious host, in his own way. He called up Leroy, his ever-loyal farmhand and mischief-making sidekick, who showed up in a truck that looked like it had survived 3 apocalypses. When Mike explained the situation, Leroy's eyes lit up with the mischief of a kid about to prank his big sister. "So," Leroy said, scratching his chin, "she wants a fancy party at Serenity Pond? Sounds like the pigs could use a bath." Mike grinned. "Exactly. And I think Sir Porrington's overdue for a little socializing." As the sun rose on party day, Mike and Leroy guided the pigs, freshly coated in their beloved mud, toward the glittering spectacle Karen had assembled. The pond was now festooned with string lights, balloons, gourmet catering, and a cake that practically begged for disaster. Mike watched from a distance, arms folded, as guests arrived. Karen buzzed around proudly, acting as if she were unveiling a 5-star resort. That pride quickly gave way to panic as pigs began to wander between tables, sniffing hors d'oeuvres, flinging mud on expensive shoes, and one, Sir Porrington, making a beeline for the cake. Teens giggled and snapped selfies with the pigs. Some screamed. Some posed. Karen meanwhile was losing her mind. And Mike? He just sipped his coffee, smiled, and thought, "Welcome to Serenity Pond, Karen." Then Mike saw it, Sir Porrington trotting with purpose, eyes locked on the towering birthday cake like a heat-seeking missile. Within seconds, chaos erupted. Karen's shrieks echoed across the lawn as the pig joyfully dove into the cake, snout first. Guests burst into hysterical laughter, pigs squealed in delight, and the elegant party descended into a mud-soaked circus. Leaning casually against his porch railing, coffee in hand, Mike watched the scene unfold with quiet satisfaction. "Guess country life ain't for everyone," he muttered with a chuckle, sipping contentedly as Karen slipped comically into the muddy shallows of Serenity Pond, shrieking and flailing in her frosting-streaked designer suit. He didn't know how the day would end, but watching her wrestle Sir Porrington in a sea of glitter and mud was already worth every second. Beside the chaos, Mike stood at the edge of the pond, taking in the spectacle. Pigs toppling table centerpieces, balloons floating off into the breeze, and Karen furiously barking orders at her bewildered catering crew. Leroy, doubled over with laughter beside him, wiped tears from his cheeks. "Boss," he wheezed between fits of laughter, "I ain't seen anything this beautiful since Uncle Eddie set the chicken coop on fire with a bottle rocket." Mike grinned, unable to hold back a laugh. It was strangely poetic. Serenity Pond had never looked so serene, assuming serenity included pigs rolling joyfully in the mud. Just then an old pickup truck skidded to a stop in the driveway. Jenny, Mike's best friend, stepped out, her eyebrows raised in shock as she took in the scene. "Wow," she said, walking up beside him, "when you said Karen was throwing a party, I pictured fewer pigs." Mike snorted and pointed toward the mayhem. "Yeah, she's over there, trying to convince the caterers that pigs were not part of the menu." Jenny laughed. "You're gonna have a great story for the next county fair." Mike smiled proudly, watching Sir Porrington lounge beside the destroyed cake table like a war hero basking in victory. "You know," he said, "I couldn't have done it without that pig." "He deserves a medal," Jenny replied with a smirk, nudging him. Their moment was cut short by the screech of Karen's voice. "You!" she shrieked, heels sinking into the grass as she stomped toward him, mud smeared across her pantsuit and frosting in her hair. She jabbed a finger at Mike. "You deliberately ruined Amber's special day." Mike met her fury with a calm, polite smile. "Now, Miss Jenkins, you decided to throw a party at my pond without asking. I just figured if you wanted an authentic country experience, pigs should be part of the charm." Karen's face turned beet red, her hands trembling around her clipboard like it was a weapon. "This isn't over," she spat, brandishing it at him. "Expect a lawsuit. You'll regret humiliating me like this." With that, she spun around, only to trip in the mud again, before storming off toward her stunned guests. Leroy clapped Mike on the back, still grinning. "Don't sweat it, boss. She'll probably never set foot near this pond again." But Mike wasn't so sure. He knew Karen well enough to recognize a grudge when he saw one. She was too proud, too vengeful to let something like this slide. As the guests began to disperse, Mike, Jenny, and Leroy worked together to clean up the remains of the failed party. They pulled balloons from tree branches, gathered stray plates, and tried to corral the pigs, with the help of a few amused teens. The pigs, of course, turned it into a game of muddy tag. Jenny shook her head, laughing. "Honestly, Mike, I think the pigs are smarter than the kids." Mike chuckled, but his thoughts were elsewhere. Karen's words lingered in his mind like storm clouds on the horizon. That night, as the sun dipped below the trees and quiet returned to Serenity Pond, Mike paced his porch restlessly. The laughter had faded, replaced by a gnawing unease. Leroy joined him on the porch steps, offering a cold bottle of lemonade. "Don't let her get to you," he said firmly. "You stood your ground. You did the right thing." Mike gave a small, grateful smile. Leroy was right. But he couldn't shake the feeling that Karen wasn't finished. And the next morning, his fears were confirmed. A new envelope was taped to his front door, neat, pastel-colored, and aggressively formal. Mike tore it open slowly, dread settling in his gut. Inside was a cold, professional letter from Karen's lawyer, accusing him of property damage and emotional distress. His name was typed at the top in bold letters, and his heart sank as he read the legal threats. He groaned aloud, running a hand through his hair. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Mike ran a weary hand over his face. It was clear now, Karen was hell-bent on escalating things and this battle was far from over. Not wanting to face it alone, Mike grabbed his phone and quickly called Jenny. She arrived within minutes, stepping onto the porch with determination in her stride. She took the letter from Mike's hand, scanning its contents with narrowed eyes. "She's seriously suing you because pigs crashed her party?" Jenny asked, incredulous. Mike nodded grimly, rubbing his temples. "I didn't want any of this, Jenny." But she crossed a line. She didn't even ask to use the pond, just assumed she could. And now she's acting like she owns the place. Jenny's expression shifted from disbelief to thoughtful resolve. Maybe someone needs to remind her she can't just bully people because she's the head of the HOA. Maybe it's time she learned a little something about respect and boundaries. Mike raised an eyebrow, curious. "What exactly are you suggesting?" A mischievous smile spread across Jenny's face as she glanced toward the pigs lounging peacefully by the pond. "Karen might have lawyers and letters," she said with growing confidence, "but you have something she doesn't." Mike blinked, confused. "What?" Jenny leaned closer, lowering her voice in a conspiratorial whisper. "You've got pigs." Mike laughed, caught off guard by the boldness of her statement, but he couldn't deny the truth in it. Karen had declared war armed with pride and paperwork. But Mike had a loyal herd, led by the indomitable Sir Porrington. As he gazed out at the pond, a spark of determination lit in his eyes. Karen might have power in courtrooms, but Mike had grit, friends who stood by him, and an army of pigs unafraid of a little mud. If Karen wanted to play dirty, Mike was ready. Because nobody messed with his pigs, his land or Serenity Pond, and got away clean. Leroy placed a firm hand on Mike's shoulder. "We're with you, boss," he said resolutely. Jenny squeezed Mike's arm with a reassuring smile. "He's right, Mike. We'll fight this. Karen's counting on you to fold under pressure, but she's underestimated us all." Mike nodded slowly, drawing strength from their support, though a quiet unease still tugged at him. Legal battles were unfamiliar ground. Karen had the money, the resources, and the kind of cutthroat determination that made her dangerous. That evening, restless and seeking solace, Mike wandered down to Serenity Pond. It had always been a place of calm, a retreat from the noise and mess of the world. But now, standing at its edge, the pond seemed to reflect the turmoil brewing in his mind. He wasn't just facing a lawsuit, he was standing up to years of unchecked entitlement. A soft grunt pulled him from his thoughts. Turning, Mike saw Sir Porrington trotting up beside him, eyes curious, movements gentle, as if sensing his friend's unease. "You sure know how to make an entrance," Mike murmured with a fond smile, crouching to scratch behind the pig's ear. Sir Porrington leaned into the touch with a content sigh, his simple presence somehow grounding. "I hope we're ready for this," Mike whispered. "Karen's not the type to back down." The pig nudged his leg firmly as if saying, "Neither are we." In the days that followed, Mike threw himself into preparation, researching property laws, reading up on HOA disputes, and awkwardly rehearsing his arguments aloud, much to Leroy's amusement. Jenny, meanwhile, began rallying support from the neighborhood. To Mike's surprise, many came forward with their own tales of Karen's overreach. Turns out, he wasn't her only victim, just the first willing to take a stand. The tension around the farm grew heavier with each passing day, but the real turning point came one quiet Saturday afternoon. Mike was cleaning out the barn when he heard a hesitant knock at the door. Wiping his hands on his jeans, he opened it, and froze. Standing there, clutching an envelope and looking thoroughly uncomfortable, was Amber Jenkins, Karen's teenage daughter. "Oh, Mr. Mitchell?" she began, barely meeting his eyes. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything. My mom, she didn't even ask if I wanted a party. She just did it. And now she's dragging you into court over something that wasn't even your fault. It's not right." Mike blinked, stunned. Amber thrust the envelope toward him. "This is a letter I wrote to the judge. I told the truth. I hope it helps." Before he could speak, she added, almost shyly, "Also, Sir Porrington was the coolest thing that's ever happened at one of my mom's parties." Mike laughed, genuinely, freely, for the first time in days. As she turned and disappeared down the driveway, Mike stood in the doorway clutching the envelope, a new fire in his chest. Karen had made the mistake of thinking fear was universal. But Amber's courage proved otherwise. The next morning, sunlight spilled across the dewy grass around Serenity Pond. Mike sipped his coffee on the porch, reflecting on Amber's unexpected visit. Her letter was tucked safely in his folder now, ready to be included in his legal response. He didn't know if it would win the case, but it had cracked the armor Karen wore like a crown. And that was something. But just as hope began to bloom, a new dread took hold. The pigs were unusually quiet. Sir Porrington, who normally announced the sunrise like a muddy rooster, was nowhere to be heard. There was no snorting, no squealing, no sound at all. Mike set down his mug, heart quickening, and headed for the pen. What he saw stopped him cold. The gate stood wide open. The pigs were gone. All of them. No broken fence. No scattered feet. Just trampled grass and eerie silence. "Leroy!" Mike shouted, panic rising. Leroy came stumbling out of the barn, shirt half-buttoned and boots barely on. "What's going on? You yellin' like the place is—" He stopped short when he saw the empty pen. His face went pale. "Well, that ain't right." They searched the property for over an hour, calling out names, checking every usual hiding spot, even the old tire swing Sir Porrington occasionally used for mid-afternoon naps. Nothing. Jenny arrived shortly after, alarmed by Mike's call. She joined the search immediately. Word spread fast, and soon neighbors began arriving with flashlights, buckets of feed, and determined expressions. The pigs were missing. And someone had made sure they disappeared without a trace. Even teenagers from the infamous Sweet 16 fiasco showed up, pockets full of treats and eyes filled with curiosity, eager to help find the now legendary hogs. What began as a crisis slowly transformed into an impromptu community rally. The irony wasn't lost on Mike. These were the very people Karen had tried to control with threats and rules, now trudging through muddy fields and thick woods to help rescue the animals she likely wished would disappear forever. Each step Mike took along the forested edge of his land, a deeper suspicion crept in. This didn't feel like an accident. Karen was petty and vindictive, but this was next level even for her. Back at the farmhouse, Jenny paced the porch, eyes scanning the horizon. If she had anything to do with this, she muttered, it'd be incredibly stupid. There are cameras, witnesses, half the neighborhood saw those pigs yesterday. Mike nodded silently. He already suspected as much, but proving it would be the challenge. Just past noon, one of the neighborhood teens came jogging up the gravel path, breathless and red-faced. We found something, he called out, waving a scrap of pink fabric. Jenny took it, squinting. Is this Karen's scarf? The teen nodded. Yeah. She wore it at the party. We found it tied to a bush near the West Trail. Looked like it got snagged or ripped off. Mike's jaw tightened. That trail led directly to the gated Willow Creek community, Karen's kingdom. Without hesitation he grabbed his keys. We're going for a drive. Jenny and Leroy hopped into the truck without question. Gravel spat from the tires as they sped toward Willow Creek's pristine streets and carefully trimmed hedges. They reached the gate just as it was closing behind another resident. Mike slid through before it shut. They cruised slowly past towering mansions and ornamental fountains, eyes scanning each yard. Then Jenny gasped, pointing toward a backyard where a white vinyl fence buckled under pressure from something large and restless. A loud snort. A triumphant oink. That's Porkington, Mike said, heart racing. He pulled the truck over and leapt out. Slipping through a side gate, they found all the pigs penned inside a hilariously over-the-top party setup. Kiddie pools, pink flamingo floats, glittery confetti buckets, and folding chairs arranged like some surreal backyard festival. It looked like Karen had tried to restage her Sweet 16, with pigs. At the center of it all, Sir Porrington stood atop an inflatable flamingo, his face a portrait of royal disdain. Mike stepped forward slowly, relief and disbelief tangling in his chest. Porkington, buddy, what did they do to you? Before they could round up the pigs, Karen burst from the house, flanked by her lawyer Harold and two visibly uncomfortable HOA board members. Her face was a cocktail of fury and panic. You're trespassing, she screeched. I'll have you arrested. Mike raised an eyebrow, gesturing to the scene. And you're pignapping? I'd say we're even. Karen sputtered. They wandered in. I was keeping them safe until animal control. In your glitter pool? Mike interrupted. With monogrammed confetti buckets? Sounds real official. Harold winced. Ms. Jenkins, this doesn't look good, he muttered under his breath. The HOA board members exchanged looks and took a step away from Karen, who glanced around and realized her support was evaporating. Jenny snapped several photos. Just in case she tries to spin this, she said. Leroy, unbothered, was already coaxing the pigs out one by one using peanut butter crackers as bait. Sir Porrington dismounted from his flamingo with slow, deliberate dignity, letting out a sharp snort in Karen's direction on his way out. Back at Serenity Pond, the pigs were welcomed like returning war heroes. Neighbors clapped and cheered as the herd reunited with their mud pits and familiar surroundings. Mike stood in awe, overwhelmed, not just by the return of his pigs or the ridiculous victory over Karen, but by the sheer unity of the people around him. There was Jenny, Leroy, teenagers who now preferred pigs over parties. And even Amber, watching quietly from the pond's edge, eyes soft with relief. Karen's downfall came swiftly after. The HOA formally removed her the following week, citing misconduct, abuse of power, and as Mike's favorite clause read, unlawful temporary relocation of livestock. Amber, according to the local gossip mill, went to live with her father, and Mike figured that was for the best. Weeks later, Mike threw a celebration of his own, Pond Appreciation Day. There was barbecue, pie judging, live music, and of course the star attraction, the pigs. Sir Porrington wore a tiny paper crown and a handmade sash that read Party King, his expression one of deep, smug satisfaction. As laughter rippled across the pond, kids splashed by the shore, and Leroy tried unsuccessfully to teach line dancing to a particularly stubborn goat, Mike leaned back in his chair, a cold lemonade in hand. Peace had returned, not because trouble was gone, but because the community had chosen to rise together. And as the golden light of sunset shimmered across the water, Mike raised his glass in a quiet toast, to the pigs, the pond, and the most unforgettable party ever thrown without permission.